The New Orleans Saints started the 2024 season like a team on a mission, scoring a jaw-dropping 91 points in just 2 games and crushing opponents by massive margins. A 37-point beatdown against the Panthers in Week 1, followed by a dominant 25-point win over the Cowboys in Dallas, had everyone talking. Some believed Clint Kubiak had finally unlocked the Saints' offense. Others thought Derek Carr was set for a career year. Just 2 weeks in, New Orleans looked like a legitimate contender, but then everything collapsed. After that explosive start, the Saints didn't just lose, they completely unraveled. 7 straight losses erased any hope of a playoff run, and before the season even reached its midpoint, the team was in full crisis mode. The offense stalled, the defense cracked under pressure, and Dennis Allen was fired mid-season, a decision that had been building for years. What started as a dream season quickly turned into a nightmare. By the time the dust settled, New Orleans had missed the playoffs for the 4th straight year, leaving fans frustrated and the franchise at a dangerous crossroads. Now, 6 months later, the Saints are stuck with more questions than answers. They made a bold move by hiring Super Bowl-winning offensive coordinator Kellen Moore as their next head coach. But will that be enough to turn things around? Right now, New Orleans is in one of the worst situations in the NFL, with a roster full of overpaid veterans, no clear identity, and a front office that refuses to embrace reality. Next, we will break down how coaching changes have shaped the Saints' downfall and why the latest move could be their last chance to fix it. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more NFL content in the offseason. Let's aim for 200 likes on this video. Firing Dennis Allen was inevitable, but hiring Kellen Moore as the new head coach is a gamble that could go either way. Moore has had success as an offensive coordinator, but this is his first shot at running an entire team. Unlike previous coaching hires, this move signals that the Saints are desperate to fix their offense first. But the question is, can Moore actually turn things around with the current roster? He inherits a deeply flawed team with serious cap issues, an aging core, and a quarterback who has yet to prove he can lead a contender. The challenge for Moore isn't just about X's and O's. It's about changing the entire culture of a team that has been stuck in mediocrity for years. The Saints have been patching holes instead of making real changes, and that's exactly what got them into this mess. Unlike in his time with the Cowboys and Chargers, where he had young, dynamic rosters to work with, Moore now has to navigate one of the worst financial situations in the NFL. The Saints are paying a premium for past mistakes, and unless Moore can maximize what little he has, this coaching change might not matter. The real problem isn't just the head coach, it's the front office's refusal to rebuild. General manager Mickey Loomis has been aggressively avoiding reality, kicking salary cap problems down the road instead of addressing them head-on. Hiring Moore might bring a fresh offensive approach, but it won't fix the poor roster decisions that keep holding this team back. The Saints are hoping Moore can work miracles, but unless major structural changes happen, New Orleans will continue to sink. When Drew Brees retired after the 2020 season, the Saints had a critical decision to make: commit to a full rebuild or try to stay competitive with a patchwork roster. They chose the latter, and that single decision has haunted them ever since. Instead of hitting reset, the front office attempted to force their way back into playoff contention without a long-term plan. In 2021, they started 5-2 with Jameis Winston at quarterback, but when he tore his ACL, the season unraveled. Instead of taking that as a sign to rebuild, they doubled down on short-term fixes, hoping to squeeze out another playoff run. By 2022, it was clear the team was directionless. They shuffled between quarterbacks, relying on a 35-year-old Andy Dalton while trying to develop Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed as the next wave of playmakers. The result? A 7-10 record that looked better on paper than it actually was. That was the moment to trade aging stars like Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara while they still had value. Instead, the Saints ignored reality and kept pushing forward like a contender. This stubborn approach led to massive cap problems, forcing them to hand out reckless contracts that are still weighing them down today. Now, they're trapped in the worst possible scenario. Not rebuilding, not competing, just existing in NFL purgatory. Their refusal to embrace a fresh start has left them with a bloated payroll, declining veterans, and no clear path forward. Every NFL team has to manage their salary cap, but no one has done it worse than the New Orleans Saints under Mickey Loomis. Instead of planning for the future, he has repeatedly restructured contracts, pushed back cap hits, and overpaid aging veterans. This reckless approach has left the Saints in a financial nightmare with one of the worst cap situations in the entire league. Year after year, they delay the inevitable, acting like a Super Bowl window still exists when in reality, they are miles away from being a contender. The Derek Carr contract is a prime example of this mismanagement. Giving $150 million to a quarterback who has never won a playoff game was a desperate move that only made things worse. But that's just one piece of the problem. Extending Cam Jordan at age 34 for $28 million guaranteed was another costly mistake. These types of deals aren't about winning. They're about hiding the truth from fans and making the team seem competitive when it isn't. Instead of clearing cap space and focusing on young talent, Loomis has locked the Saints into years of financial pain with contracts they can't escape. Now, the team is in a no-win situation. They currently have $50.7 million in dead cap, meaning they're paying players who aren't even on the team anymore. On top of that, they're $46 million over the cap for 2025, the worst in the NFL. This isn't bad luck. It's the direct result of short-sighted decisions that prioritize the present over the future. The Saints are stuck in a cycle of pushing money into future seasons, but at some point, the bill has to be paid. The worst place for an NFL team to be isn't at the bottom. It's stuck in mediocrity with no clear direction. That's exactly where the New Orleans Saints are right now. They're not good enough to compete for a championship, but they're also not bad enough to land a top draft pick and reset the franchise. Every year, they hover around 6 to 8 wins, missing the playoffs but still refusing to embrace a rebuild. Instead of taking a step back to move forward, they keep trying to patch things up, only making the situation worse. Part of the problem is the NFC South itself. The Saints play in a division that's not elite, which means even a struggling team like New Orleans can win just enough games to hurt their draft position without actually contending. The Falcons and Panthers are on the rise, building young cores that will be dangerous in the future. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay remains a step ahead, leaving the Saints in a strange middle ground. Not the worst team, but nowhere near the best. This cycle of barely staying afloat prevents them from landing a franchise-altering player in the draft, while also keeping them from making a real playoff push. The reality is, unless something drastic changes, this team is stuck in a 4 to 7 win cycle for the foreseeable future. They're too talented to completely collapse, but not good enough to break through as a real contender. The front office's refusal to hit reset is the biggest issue, as they continue pushing money into the future, rather than taking a step back and planning ahead. At some point, they'll have to accept reality. But for now, they're stuck in the worst spot in sports, going nowhere fast. At this point, the New Orleans Saints don't have a choice. 2025 has to be a reset year. With their cap situation in complete disarray and no clear path to contention, the front office will need to make tough decisions to clean up the mess. The first step will be restructuring contracts just to get under the cap, starting with Derek Carr, whose massive cap hit can be reduced from $46 million to $15 million by spreading out his salary over future years. Moves like this will provide short-term relief, but they only delay the inevitable. At some point, the Saints have to stop kicking the can down the road and face reality. The team will also need to decide on key veteran players, including Taysom Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, and Demario Davis. Cutting Hill after June 1st would free up cap space, while Mathieu and Davis could either be restructured or moved to help ease financial pressure. On the field, 2025 will likely be a transition year, where the focus shifts toward developing young talent rather than chasing an unrealistic playoff spot. The Saints have 4 picks in the top 100, including the 9th overall pick, which gives them a chance to add much-needed talent, especially on the defensive side. The biggest challenge will be balancing short-term survival with long-term growth. The Saints need to stop treating every season like a Super Bowl window and start building toward actual success in 2026 and beyond. That means making smart draft choices, avoiding bad contracts, and committing to a real plan instead of trying to stay competitive at all costs. If they approach 2025 the right way, they can finally start digging out of this hole. But if they make the same mistakes again, they'll be right back in this same situation next year. What do you think? Should the Saints finally commit to a full rebuild, or will they keep making the same mistakes? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep NFL breakdowns.